How's your faith today? Faith is one of the most important foundational aspects of our walk with God. The Bible says without it, we can't please God. But with faith, we can do anything. And everything we do must be done through faith. I want to talk about it just a little bit. I want to talk about the faith builder. And God is the author and the finisher of our faith. And we'll talk about that for a little bit. Matthew 8 and verse 23 through 27. Now, when he got into a boat, his disciples followed him. Didn't take a lot of faith for that. He just said for them to follow him, and he got in the boat. They got in the boat with him. And suddenly a great tempest arose on the sea, so that the boat was covered with waves, but he was asleep. Then his disciples came to him and awoke him, saying, Lord, save us, for we are perishing. But he said to them, why are you fearful, O ye of little faith? Then he arose and rebuked the wind and the sea, and there was a great calm. So the men marveled, saying, who can this be that even the winds and the sea obey him? Now, this is chapter 8. And many things happened in this chapter. We see a demoniac was healed after the storm. And in chapter 9, a paralytic and a woman with issue was healed. Jairus' daughter was healed. 2 blind men were healed. And he cast the devil out of a mute and healed him. He went to the cities and villages around and healing various diseases and sicknesses. In chapter 12, he goes into the synagogue and he heals a withered hand. In chapter 13, it said he could do no mighty works because, well, there he was amongst his own home folks and they couldn't have great faith in him. But in chapter 14, right before the boat ride, he taught a multitude, and then he fed 5,000 of them, plus the women and children, with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. So this was quite a series of events over some days, and it certainly had to be a great faith builder. But in Matthew 14 and verse 22, immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side while he sent the multitudes away. And this is a little different. This is not him asleep in the back of the boat, but he said, you get in the boat and I'm going to deal with the multitude. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. Now, when evening had come, he was there alone. But the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. So now in the 4th watch of the night, Jesus went to them walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, it is a ghost, and they cried out for fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, be of good cheer, it is I, do not be afraid. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water. So he said, come. And when Peter had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, saying, Lord, save us, or save me. And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and said, oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt? And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. So the storm here was about the occupants of the boat. Simon stepped out, and to me, he did a great thing by just walking a little while on the water. But those who were in the boat came and worshiped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. So in the first storm, he was in it with the disciples, and he said, peace be still. In this one, the storm arose, and he came walking. And those that saw him, they didn't know who he was or what he was. But then he calmed the storm, and then he got into their boat. And you see a little bit of a progress here. And there will always be progression in our faith. God doesn't start us out on the tip of the mountain, but he starts us out at our level where we are. But again, he tells them, oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt? And he wasn't saying this as someone would say it really, truly wondering, why in the world are you doubting? What he's more or less saying is just examine yourself and find out where your doubt is and why you have doubt. And you're looking at this scene alone, you might think that Simon Peter had a good reason to doubt, but Jesus needed him to look inside and see truly where his doubt came from. Since the last storm, think about this, if you read it, there'd been enough miracles to equip 7 or 8 Old Testament prophets and have plenty of miracles on their resume. But the disciples were still amazed at the sudden ceasing of the wind. But the thing to understand here was not the failure for Peter of walking for a few steps and failing, or to the disciples' failure to expect another storm miracle. But what Jesus was doing to this, future of the church was taking them, like he does us, from one level to another. This was different. He wasn't in the boat this time. And so he had to test them a little bit further. What will you do and how will you feel when you're in the boat and I'm not there? But then I show up, and so you're still saved. And so he was stretching them out a little bit, kind of like a runner when he's training for a marathon. He doesn't just walk out the door one day and run 24 miles, but it takes a lot of training to build up to a marathon race. And Jesus was testing them and stretching them out and stretching their faith. And if you'll look at your life, you'll see areas and places and times where the Lord does the same thing, where he just kind of stretches you out. And don't always look at your troubles that come your way as bad luck or you took a wrong turn. I mean, we do those things also. But if you got into the same boat on the same lake and experienced that same storm every week, your faith would be at that level. That's where it would stay. And you could say, he calms my storm on that lake. And I thank God for that steady life that he's given me. And, God would still be your friend, that you woke up and said, Lord, please help me, my boat is sinking. And you would be so comfortable at that level. You'd get in that boat and say, well, here's another day and another storm, and I'll just wake him up and he'll be there for me. But he stretches us out. He has to take us to different circumstances so it builds our faith. So another storm, after many miracles, is what they experienced. The first storm, he's asleep in the back of the boat, and they actually followed him into the boat. He's in the boat, so we're all right, except they weren't all right because they had to wake him up. Lord, what, do you not care that we're about to perish? The second storm, he told them to get in the boat. He said, I'll be there later. I'm gonna let you not feel my presence for a while. I'm gonna let you walk without seeing a sign or a wonder for a while. I'm gonna let you be on a lake, and there will be a storm, but I'm gonna let you experience it before I show up. They needed to be stretched out. God will not allow our faith to be based on one event in our life. If we live for him like we should, we're going to have one event and another because our faith needs to grow. And the baskets of leftover bread, that didn't really help their fear, because when you're on the water, bread doesn't matter. That he fed 5,000 men and children and took up extra, that doesn't help. This was different. This was more like how we live. He wasn't in the boat, but he came walking, and that was very, very different. Mark 6:52 says, for they had not understood about the loaves because their heart was hardened. No matter how great life can be and how great a miracle or a provision that God brings into your life can be, when we get into trouble, sometimes that last miracle is not going to help us out quite a bit. We still have to call on a God for right now. We need him now, and we need to find him as a very present help in time of need, and he will be there. The different scene and the missing power, caused fear, but he didn't want them to get trapped into thinking it was going to be good as long as I'm on board. A different scene and a different level, a greater risk, a higher plane. It's really all about the development of our faith and our trust in God. He will not allow our faith to stay at level 1 or level 2. He's going to always test us and raise it up. In 1 Kings chapter 20 and 28, a man of God came, spoke to the king of Israel and said, thus saith the Lord, because the Syrians have said, the Lord is a God of the hills, but not a God of the valleys, therefore I will deliver all this great multitude into your hand, and you will know that I am the Lord. Because they've said, He's only a God in this area or in this circumstance. He said, I'm about to stretch you out, and I'm going to prove that I'm a God of anywhere and any time. Hills, valleys, no difference. Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, mustered an army of 36 kings to fight against Israel's very small army. And the man of God came and told Ahab that, he would use some local people to lead the battle, and God would give that victory. And so they went out at an odd hour in the afternoon, and they decimated the Syrian army. And the prophet told Ahab to be ready in the spring. He said, because Ben-Hadad's going to come back, and you're going to need to have some faith for that. You're going to need to trust God. And see, their thinking was that God was a God of the hills, but not the valleys. But God gave them a victory both times because they obeyed and they went out in faith. I've found in pastoring that there's always going to be an element of faith at every season that we go through. There might be a season when the south winds are blowing softly. And like Paul was about to leave for Rome, and the owners of the boat said, well, they thought they had obtained their purpose. And the Apostle Paul, he had been around a while, and he said, I don't feel like we should leave just because you've got a southerly wind. I feel like this trip is going to be with much harm, possibly even of the boat. And because he was true, he was right. That's exactly what it was like. Well, we find in the end, before Jesus ascended, in John 21, Simon Peter said to them, I'm going to go fishing. And they said, we're going to go with you also. So they went out, got into the boat in that night, and they didn't catch anything. But when the morning had come, they looked on the shore, and they saw Jesus standing there. And Jesus said, children, do you have any food? And they said, no. And he said, well, cast the net on the other side of the boat, and you'll find some. And they cast the net, and it was so full that they were not able to even draw it. And then that disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it's the Lord. And now when Simon heard it, that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he had removed it, and plunged into the sea. But the other disciple came in the little boat, for they were not far from the land, but about 200 cubits, dragging the net with fish. Then as soon as they had come to land and saw the fire of coals there, and fish laid on it, and bread, Jesus said, bring some of the fish which you have caught. Simon Peter went up and dragged the net full of large fish, 153. Although there were so many, the net was not broken. And Jesus says, come and eat breakfast, or come and dine. Yet none of the disciples dared ask him, who are you? Knowing that it was Jesus. So Jesus allowed them to see that he didn't have to be in the boat for miracles to happen. He was growing their faith for the journey ahead. He was stretching them out, just like he does us. So thinking about all of this, look at your life, and you're going to see some things that are very similar, and realize that God has been in control the whole time. And there are times he will let you have a little bit of space, and he may not show up. You may not feel his presence, but he's causing you to walk by faith and not by sight. But when needed, we know he will show up because he's always there, and he'll be there to help us. But God is constantly building our faith. Think about it.